Okay, we will go ahead and get started. Again, greetings and thanks for joining us for the next hour. My name is Bill Maibusch. I am project executive with the Walsh Group. We are a general contractor here in the Puget Sound region. And I also serve on the board of the local chapter of the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat. And I'll share some information about the council in just a minute. You know, we've all been affected by the COVID-19 virus, some certainly more seriously than others. And many of us have been working remotely, but not all of us. Some of us don't have that choice. Before the virus and even during the virus, many people rely on public transit and our public facilities to get us to our destinations safely and efficiently. A reliable, comprehensive transit system is critical to the growth of any major metropolis, and Seattle's in that category. Me personally, I grew up in Chicago, so I know firsthand that it was important to be able to board a bus or a train and get to your destination and do it without concern. Today's discussion is about transiting here in the Puget Sound region and what it looks like now and what the future of transiting may look like. With us today, we have 4 representatives from some of our local agencies to discuss this topic. We have Bill Bryant. He's Service Development Managing Director for King County Metro. Laurel Dunphy is Director of Operations at SeaTac Airport for the Port of Seattle. Russ Arnold is Chief Custom Experience Officer for Sound Transit. And Kendle Bjelland is Senior Program Manager with Commute Seattle. Now, before we get started, just a few housekeeping items to note. And first of all, this program is being recorded and can be obtained later on to be re-reviewed or reviewed for the first time. The attendee microphones are all muted. We will not be able to hear you. The program will start with some opening remarks from the panelists, and there will be some brief discussion. And then we'd like the audience to submit some questions for response. You can type your questions in any time using the Q&A button on your screen, and we will get to as many of those as we possibly can. And these are our 4 panelists, and we thank them for joining us today and taking some time. Just a little bit about the Council on Tall Buildings. We're just over 50 years old, and we're a nonprofit international organization located in several different countries. And we focus on tall building development and design and construction and operation, as well as developing sustainable cities. We're very multidisciplinary. We have a whole range of different professions that are part of our membership. And we also are in many, many different regions, 6 out of the 7 continents, nobody on Antarctica yet. And this is just a global map showing just where we're located. Our headquarters are in Chicago, and we also have a second headquarters in Shanghai, China. And then we also have a research office in Italy. In addition to those, we have a number of chapters around the world, as well as individuals representing the council in a total of 41 different countries. And just a quick overview about what the council does. We collect best practices and disseminate best practices and information about tall buildings and the built environment. And we do that through a number of ways. We sponsor a number of different networking events. And we also do that through our conferences. We typically hold a conference in the spring and in the fall. And these are just some of the locations that we've conducted conferences around the world over the past couple of decades. So we truly are a global organization. And we also recognize those best practices with our annual awards in a number of different categories, both in tall buildings and in the built environment and urban habitat. And we have a number of committees that we have formed that focus on different specifics relative to tall buildings in the built environment. And we also do a number of different research conductions and produce a number of different brochures and technical books. And we also produce 10 or 12 different publications each year on those subjects. And in addition to that, we put out a quarterly journal with a number of different articles related to the urban habitat or tall buildings. And we are also the official arbiters of giving titles of tallest, whether it's tallest in your city or your country or in the world. We are the official arbiters of that. Sometimes it can become controversial because there are some specific rules on how you actually measure a building's height. And as far as events, I had mentioned earlier, we do different events. Unfortunately, we have had to postpone our fall event, which was scheduled to be in Singapore. But instead of that, we're going to go live streaming from 3 different cities around the world and do a virtual conference. And there's actually a couple of different ways of being able to see that. If you are fortunate enough to live in one of the cities that they're presenting from, there will be some limited attendance allowed at that physical location. Also, we'll be doing live streaming, and we'll also be recording it, and it'll be available for viewing at a later date. And this is just kind of a layout of those 3 different cities and the timelines and when they'll be presenting with different time zones from around the world. And then lastly, our resources. We actually manage the Skyscraper Center, which is a database, and we do an inventory of every tall building around the world and keep data on all those different buildings, and keep that up to date as much as possible. For company members, they are also provided a member page that highlights their specific company and some of the works that they've been involved with. And there's more information on membership down there at the bottom. And our members are really the ones that are applying the development of our future cities, and be very involved in that. And there's more information at these 2 websites that you're welcome to look at. You don't need to be a member to access these, and we invite you to check it out. So with that, I would like to turn this over. Our first panelist to present is going to be Bill Bryant. And as I mentioned earlier, Bill is Service Development Manager with King County Metro. And Bill, maybe you can share with us just what's changed in the last few months when we go to ride a bus.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bill. And I would like to thank the organization for having us here this afternoon. This is a topic that I think is near and dear to the hearts of all the panelists and probably everybody in the audience as well. So before, let's see if I can advance the slides. Before COVID struck, the Seattle region was really in a great position in terms of transit ridership. We in Seattle were kind of bucking the industry trend across the bus industry with ridership that, while it had recently leveled off in the, I'd say, late 2018 and through 2019, our bus ridership had leveled off a bit. But bus ridership has been declining in many cities across the United States. That's not necessarily true in the rest of the world or even in the rest of North America, but for many reasons, including the Uber and Lyft competition, low gas prices, and other reasons, bus ridership had been struggling. But in Seattle, as I'm sure you're going to hear from Kendle and Russ later in the presentation, we were doing very well. King County Metro and Sound Transit and community transit, arguably the three main transit providers in Seattle, were carrying about 50% of all downtown commuters. And that outpaces almost all other major cities. And this was at a time when there were a lot of construction projects going on that were really hampering bus service, and that were creating headwinds against the ridership that we were seeing, such as the waterfront viaduct project, ongoing freeway projects, and you know, dozens of private development projects that were interfering with traffic. And of course, we had the backdrop of Amazon and the amazing employment growth that we've had in the area. When COVID hit, we immediately made a series of service reductions. We tried to pull the system back by about 15% immediately in a way that actually reduced the number of bus drivers that we needed by probably more like 20 or 25%, just in preparation for the possible impacts to our workforce. But also just seeing the writing on the wall that the ridership literally plummeted in early March. And so this has affected almost every bus route in the metro system, some 200 routes. Many of those routes are completely suspended. They haven't been operating since early March. We did put a little bit of service back in April and in June, largely because thankfully the COVID didn't have the impacts on our workforce that it might have in a worst case scenario. So these are the kind of messages that transit planners really do not like to deliver, but this is where we've been for the last several months, is our buses that normally have 35 seats and can really carry 50 or 60 people have been limited to 12 people. And the larger buses that can normally carry between 50 and 90 people are limited to 18 riders. And some of the rest of the messaging that's been out there, those of you in the local area may have seen that we just 10 days ago changed our messaging from essential trips only to now masks are required. But this is just even as the resurgence seems to be hitting. So we're very reluctant. We're not yet in a place where we can urge people to come back. We just aren't there yet. We very much hope to be soon. We've discontinued fare collection. We have seats marked, clearly marked as closed on the bus. People are getting in and out through the back door just to keep distance between bus drivers and customers. And there are many other changes that we've made to the messaging. Some of these messages are always in place. For example, stay home if you're sick, but where masks required is, things like that are difficult messages to deliver. Before COVID, Metro was carrying about 420,000 riders per day with over 1,300 buses on the road during the afternoon rush hour. Those numbers, the ridership number dropped to somewhere close to 100,000. It's now been creeping back up to about 130,000 rides per day, which, even though it's only roughly 30% of normal, it's still a lot of people. So there are a lot of people out there riding the bus. The current mode share is a bit of a mystery just because the period since March is relatively short. And usually when we look with Commute Seattle and others at mode share, we look at longer periods than that. It takes longer to collect data. So there was a period where there was nobody downtown. That's 3rd Avenue. It normally should be packed with people and buses and vehicles, and hopefully not too many non-bus vehicles, as they're not supposed to be on 3rd Avenue, and then the Amazon spheres in a ghost town environment. But what this has done, it's been a very unwelcome but very unique opportunity to look at bus rider behavior. So this is just one example of the data that we've been able to pull from a number of sources, including anonymized cell phone data, that shows the darker areas of the county have had less of a reduction in travel. These gradations of purple and blue show just the amount of travel by all modes that has been happening in April versus February of this year. So you can see that the southern parts of the county, where people tend to have lower wage jobs and probably less, not even probably, certainly less ability to telework. Travel patterns have remained closer to normal than when you get into the other parts of the county. This is just a representative chart of ridership data. It ends partway through June, so it's about a month out of date. But this shows ridership at King County Metro and Sound Transit buses, as well as streetcar and water taxi, and you can just see how it went off the cliff in early March. But then it's been creeping back up, and if this did extend to the present day, it would show a continued uptick. Another example of data that we've been able to collect and create is shown on this slide, where the chart on the right, the dotted lines show the normal demand curve and ridership curve in terms of transit boardings, and it's by hours of day. So it starts at the lower left of the right-hand chart of both charts is midnight, and at the beginning of the rush hour, it typically has a very sharp peak in the Puget Sound area. So then it goes down in midday and back way up at a very sharp peak, almost uncharacteristically sharp even among large US cities for a number of reasons. But the solid lines illustrate what's happened since COVID, where it's just really flattened out. So this is the kind of information that we can use as we try to prepare for the post-COVID era and for the more immediately for the recovery and then for the post-COVID era. This chart is the orangish line is total Metro bus capacity. The middle line, the light blue, shows that capacity under the COVID constraints that I described of 12 to 18 passengers. And then the lower line shows what we were actually carrying in about late June. And one of the last examples of data, of the kind of data that we've been collecting, shows where in the county, as ridership started to tick back up in June, where it was ticking up more and less. And so the yellow lines are where we've seen greater gains in ridership, and the blue lines are where we've seen little or no gain. And I'll go flip back to that really quickly. Again, that correlates pretty closely in many cases to the ridership profile, to the demographics of the riders on individual routes. So you can imagine that all of that is very fascinating to our transit planning teams at Metro and other transit agencies. And now, you know, we are talking very seriously about what is the future going to look like. COVID has caused huge declines in the revenue that King County Metro collects and Sound Transit collects for both capital projects and for service. In an unfortunate coincidence, some City of Seattle funding that we've been receiving for the last 6 years runs out at the end of the year. That alone accounts for 8% of our entire operating budget. As we look forward, no one knows what the timing of the relaxing of the social distancing requirements is going to be. So Metro's been certainly adhering and trying to mirror and anticipate the relaxation of those requirements. There are many ways to kind of back off of that. For example, last week, TriMet down in Portland went to a 3-foot distancing requirement. We don't have the state guidance or any assurance that that's a good idea here in the Puget Sound area quite yet, but that might be the next step, or the next step might be to go to match the capacity with the number of seats on each kind of bus, or there just are a number of approaches that we could take. And it's, when does the vaccine become available? How long will it take for people to get comfortable, not just on transit? I think people are realizing that the kind of confined situation that you have on transit vehicles really is not that different to what we face in the office, at the gym, at the restaurant, on the sidewalk, and almost everywhere else. So I think, you know, as an industry, we're very much starting to hope, and I think expect, that people will again become confident of their ability to mix with others kind of across the board without an unnecessary focus on transit. And then there's the obvious telecommuting trends. Are there going to be 20% of people telecommuting to white collar jobs on any given day? Will it be 30%? How will that turn out? As well as changes in traffic patterns and many other considerations. There are some silver linings. Many projects are going forward. For example, Link Light Rail is still actively building out in our region. And so that will have tremendous benefits to the overall transit network in Seattle and throughout the Puget Sound region. So with that, I will just briefly remind folks that King County Metro delivers a lot of bus service. That's our primary line of business, but we do a lot of other, we provide many other services as well. We actually operate the light rail and streetcar lines in the Seattle area. We operate the King County Water Taxi, and we also have the largest van pool system in the entire country. So our toolkit is not limited to bus transit, but bus transit is our main line of business. And I think with that, thank you very much, and we will move on to the next panelist.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate that. Just a follow-up I have regarding the reduced capacity on your rolling buses. If a bus is already at capacity and maintaining social distancing and can't accommodate any more passengers, is the bus still going to stop at the stop and tell those waiting, sorry, we're full, or are they just going to drive by because they can't take any more passengers on? I think either way, you're going to probably get some angry people shaking their fists or digits at you, at your driver.
That's a great question. Our bus operators are not supposed to allow the bus to fill up beyond those numbers. So we've actually instituted a new protocol, which includes the bus driver essentially changing the sign on the front of the bus to read bus full. And at the same time, we've put a minimum of 30 extra buses out on a number of routes where we know there are issues. So we are doing our best to address that, but you're right, it's not a great situation in many cases. We do have a very good idea through literally daily monitoring of each route in the system of where that's happening. So we're trying to minimize that.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Next presenter is Laurel Dunphy. Laurel is Director of Operations at SeaTac Airport. Laurel, I haven't been on an airplane since early March, which is unusual for me. And I'm sure there's many others that have not flown in a while. What can we expect when we arrive at the airport, and how do we prepare ourselves before we get to the airport?
Thanks, Bill, and thank you all for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Bill, for filling us in on King County as well. We are seeing a lot of the same challenges, and a lot of the same graphs could apply in the airline industry and what's happening with demand since March. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've been coming to the airport every day since this has happened, and I can tell you we're very, very eager to see you all back here at the airport. And just to give some, statistics, normally this time of year, we would see through our front door, this doesn't include our connecting customers, over 60,000 customers a day coming through our front door, starting very, very early in the morning and staying, through all day to the red-eye flights. Unfortunately, we hit a low of about 2,800 people in April coming through the front door. This place was a ghost town. It was kind of scary to walk through the terminal almost. But I did feel safer in the terminal than I did feel going to Costco at the time. So no offense to Costco, but just a lot fewer people. We're now in every day ranging somewhere from 15 to 18,000 a day coming through the front door, and on a really good day, maybe 20,000 people. So business is starting to pick up. We were starting to see a good trend, and unfortunately this wave of coronavirus phase 2, if you want to call it that, has impacted people's decisions on travel. So let me share with you some things, and hopefully we can get you all feeling a little more comfortable about coming back to the airport. If I can get the slides to advance here. Heather, can you help me out here? There we go. All right, so we call this our travel ribbon, and you know, when COVID happened, we really we started early. Back in February, we were seeing this starting to happen within Asia, and we started taking apart every aspect of our travel journey and looking at every aspect of the customer's experience and what did we need to do to make the customer feel more comfortable and more confident here. You know, airports are the economic engine of our region, and we want to help be a part in that restoration of the economic vitality of the Seattle region. And so we've looked at all these aspects, and I have a short video I want to play for you that I think highlights very nicely some of these programs that we've put in place, and then I'll talk about a few more on the back end.
Welcome to Checking In at SEA. It's probably been a while since you've been to the airport, and with that in mind, our #1 priority is your safety and well-being as you come into the terminal. We put together the Fly Healthy at SEA program, and we took immediate actions when this COVID-19 situation started. We have more that will make your experience here look a little different and feel a little different. #1, when you come in here to begin with, we want you to wear a face covering. Once again, things are going to look a little bit different. Come on in and we'll show you what we're talking about. At the ticketing level, we've added plexiglass screening at the ticket counters to be in between employees and travelers as they make transactions. In addition, we put up signage for reminders for physical distancing, including on stanchions and then also on the floor. Some 2,900 floor stickers have been added throughout the terminal. Also, our common use kiosks, we've shut off every other one to promote physical distancing. We've added hundreds of hand sanitizer stations throughout the entire terminal. In fact, go on our SEA app and you'll find the location for all of them, and you can find the nearest one to you. We've reconfigured our checkpoints to keep in mind physical spacing. We've got reminders on signs, we've got stickers on the floor. We're keeping in mind spacing in front of you, behind you, and also side to side. You'll see that every other queue line has been blocked off to encourage that spacing. Reminders for when you approach TSA is separate your food for X-ray screening. Also, hang on to your boarding pass as you show them to document checkers. Also, keep your spacing. And finally, keep that facial covering on. At the satellite trains, this could be a point of congestion. So #1, keep in mind, keep that facial covering on. We've got signage throughout the area as well as stickers on the floor for physical distancing. If you're uncomfortable with how many people are on a train, feel free to step back out and wait for the next one. It's only 2 to 3 minutes away. We continue to frequently disinfect with medical grade cleaning products, especially high-touch areas like buttons, handrails, and countertops. We spent over 5,700 hours per week cleaning the shuttle buses and the terminal here at SEA. Each dining and retail tenant at SEA has been required to provide a COVID-19 operational readiness plan in order to show how their services will be provided while limiting close contacts. These protocols include details on physical distancing, hygiene and sanitation for employees, and personal protective equipment. Our airline partners are also working very hard to keep travelers safe as they are disinfecting after each flight. Just like SEA, all airlines require facial covering. Keep that in mind as well too when you're waiting at the gate areas, and keep distancing between travel parties. If you have any questions, contact your airline about your flight. Finally, we encourage people to continue to wear their face coverings as they access ground transportation. This includes going into the garage, picking up the shuttle for the rental car facility, as well as reaching out to taxis and ride shares. This is just the beginning. We're planning for a busier terminal and better times ahead. We miss you, and we're looking forward to that time when we can welcome you back to SEA.
So that was Perry Cooper, our Director of Public Relations, and I appreciate him doing that video. You can find that on YouTube if you'd like to see it again yourself. And just to reiterate a couple things, you know, the first step obviously is what you can do even before you arrive at the airport. And that really is to utilize that check-in at home and online check-in and print all the documents you need before you come to the airport, so you're travel ready, so you could even bypass that lobby experience. But as mentioned in the video, and I wasn't sure that was going to play for you, so this is sort of a recap of everything you saw in the video. We have been very strong visual campaign about physical distancing, where our hand sanitizers are, and trying to communicate as many times in as many different ways with our travelers and our passengers about what's going on, and putting up those protective barriers to allow for interactions where they are necessary, such as when you check a bag, there's now a plastic protective barrier that keeps you from close contact with a customer service agent. And we're working closely with our airport community here. You know, you think about the airport as just the airlines and that kind of things, but we have a whole world of our airport dining and retail tenants and those, and we've been working collectively with them to make this a safe environment for all of you. So I think now the airport's installed about 250 hand sanitizers. The airlines have one at every single gate. So they're really taking good care of you like you've never seen before. So I want to give a shout out to the airlines and all that they've had to do as well to make sure that you can fly healthy at SCA. Next slide, please. One of the very important things to us, and we launched this campaign on July 1st, and I think we saw this within our community. It was recommended that we wear masks. The commissioners for the Port of Seattle instituted a policy before the governor actually instituted one for the state. We were about a week ahead of that announcement, and so to support that, we came up with this Mask Up campaign, and you will see our pathfinders. There's a picture of one roaming the airport with this nice little package, which contains a face mask. It actually contains some Purell hand sanitizer wipes as well, which I know are really, really hard to get right now. And we've dispersed over 3,000 of these. There's a lot of people coming into our community who may not be aware of the Mask Up requirement in the state of Washington. And we've really had some very positive reaction from this, and we're trying to create a positive social media campaign around this to encourage people to mask up so we can get rid of COVID-19 in our state. So we can go to the next slide, please. So one of the things that we've been doing, and we're one of the few airports in the United States, I know LAX was testing this, and I believe a couple other airports in the Midwest are also doing it, is testing temperature taking for looking at elevated body temperatures. This is not something that is typically had been within the port's mission. Our commissioners directed us to do this in early May, and so we've been doing testing with the latest technology sensors. We set them up in June to test our international arriving customers after they exited the customs facility. And this July, and we'll complete the test here by the end of the week. We've been integrating temperature testing as part of the security checkpoint queue. So as you walk through, it registers your temperature. It's actually picking up from your eye ducts, your tear ducts, and taking your temperature there. And then if you are over 100.4, the system would ping and tell us that we have somebody with a high temperature, and we could go and discuss what the next steps were with that passenger. The good news is we haven't had a single person coming to the airport with over 100-degree temperature, which is where we set the initial threshold for the read. This is a completely voluntary test. We've not required people to participate in this, and we're trying to test it for efficacy. We've found that we do have challenges with this technology. If someone's wearing glasses, hats, even long bangs, you're not able to get their temperature. It actually, the technology as it exists kind of blocks us from getting a good read. So we're working on ways that we could get this improved. Again, this is just a proof of concept. We haven't made a final decision whether we'll deploy this across the airport. We'll be going back to our commission's leadership and discussing that at the August 11th Port of Seattle Commission meeting. So if you're interested in temperature checking, that would be a good meeting to follow, and that meeting is available online on the Port of Seattle website. We'll go to the next slide, please. So a couple other things. Obviously, we're trying to make this as touchless and an innovative travel experience as we can. Many people aren't aware, but we launched a product late last year, which is pre-book parking in the main terminal garage. And it also happens to be touchless. So you'll print out some documents at home, it'll have a barcode, and you will not need to touch the parking arm as you come into the airport. So that's great. We've also, throughout our restrooms, installed touchless paper towel dispensers. So there's no more having to scroll down to try to get your paper towel out. It's all touchless. And we've implemented mobile ordering for many of our restaurants here at the airport. We're working on touchless bag tag issuance, so you won't even have to touch those screens that you saw Perry Cooper go up and touch for check-in. We've got an RFI out on virtual queuing. How can we virtually queue people in the security checkpoint so it's a more fluid experience? Disney has a concept of Fast Pass. We're looking at that kind of technology. Is there something we can do to help us, even when we're not concerned about physical distancing, spread out the flow and make it a more reliable experience going through the checkpoint? UV cleaning and other sanitation methods. There's always new technology and new measures emerging that we're looking at. We are getting overwhelmed with different companies who have a breakthrough in ways that can help us better clean the handrails on the escalators or better sanitize our water stations throughout. And then biometric exit is something that's coming. And basically this is a biometric exit. Instead of handing the agent before you leave the country on an international flight where they verify your passport credentials, you're going to just stand and basically in front of an iPad, and it's going to verify biometrically that you're departing the country and your information leaves. Your information is in the system for the arrival in the new city. So very exciting technology that's coming. That was actually coming anyway, but we will have that fully deployed early next year. Next slide. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Laurel, thank you. Very good video, very informative. I appreciate that. I saw the one slide you had where you remind you to be 6 feet apart or 2 Chinook salmon, so I have to remember that. And just one question I had, you've got a couple of high profile projects currently ongoing out there as you're always improving or expanding your facilities. And one's the International Arrivals Facility. The other one is the North Satellite expansion. Any changes to getting those completed, or any changes in their design as a result of what we're going through now?
So no changes to the design. Obviously, as many of you are very well aware, the governor implemented some very strict protocols on construction projects, and we were very, very concerned about the impact that those COVID restrictions, and we were very concerned about the workforce also being impacted with COVID-19. And I'm pleased to say 2021 is going to be an extremely exciting year here at the Port of Seattle. Both projects will have their official openings. The International Arrivals Facility, that main building, substantial completion is mid-November of this year. We will take about 45 to 60 days to do our activation activities. And so during that time, we could see a couple airplanes arrive on the A side and go through that facility as we test it and as we roll out a new concept internationally. So that will happen later this year. And then when the bridge is completed, our new bridge that connects the South Satellite and the new IAF facility opens in mid-January, we'll have another probably 45 days of activation. So we look to have a very exciting spring for that project. The North Satellite project is continuing, and we took great advantage of the lower passenger loads to try to offset some of the COVID impacts we were seeing. And that's on target for Q3 of 2021. So very excited, a lot of new stuff here at the airport. So when hopefully this COVID thing is mastered and it's behind us. You guys will be able to experience those really great new facilities here at the airport.
Very good. Thank you, Laurel, for the information. Next, we have Russ Arnold. Russ is Chief Customer Experience Officer with Sound Transit. And Russ, please share with us your role and how Sound Transit is responding to its riders' questions and concerns.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me. We appreciate the opportunity to get to speak. And one of the great things about being part of these panels is I get to learn a lot from everybody that is also presenting. So I appreciate the colleagues that are on the call. There we go. So for us, we wanted to start with really framing this in terms of what do our passengers need to continue to be confident using our services, as well as what do they need to know when they're ready to come back to needing our services. And so we started with in early, late February, early March, when we started to see things shifting and our ridership dropping, to build ridership scenarios to analyze all of our routes. So we built 4 ridership level scenarios that we use to monitor each one of our routes and adjust as appropriate. So the ability to maintain social distancing is kind of the first level. This is very akin to what Bill was talking about, how many people in the bus, how many people on the train. And then recognizing that there's a point where we begin to see increased demand. And that demand starts to stress the ability for people to be able to social distance, or have the ability to social distance, as we see our peaks increase for the train or even our buses. And so we watch that to deploy the appropriate amount of service to respond to that. Next would be commute normalization. And we believe that commute normalization is going to be different than what it was pre-COVID. We are talking a lot about pre-COVID was what it was, and where we're at right now, we shouldn't be thinking that this is just a pause and everything will turn back to normal in 12 months or 18 months and look exactly like it did in December of 2019. So we're really trying to understand what is changing for people's commute patterns. And then demand responsiveness. So this is kind of when we're back to what it looks like and what the new travel patterns look like for all routes. And I want to be clear here, we believe that a lot of our routes are in different states of these 4 levels. The system's not going to come back equally. It didn't draw down equally. We have some more durable routes that have maintained ridership during this time, or higher levels of ridership, while we've had some that really ridership decreased dramatically. So it's impossible for us to predict how this is going to unfold as we go forward. So we want to make sure we monitor and are responsive to it as responsibly as we can to what people need. So we started with research. So we launched a regional customer survey for us to understand what people were looking for from us to be confident in riding. We've coordinated with our partners at Community Transit, King County Metro, Kitsap, and we've tried to pull those data views and those crosstabs together so we can get an understanding of what the region is looking at. And at the same time, we've been working with our partners at Commute Seattle and our Orca employer data analysis to understand kind of what is going on and what is changing with people's work life, as well as the rest of their lives that are changing their travel patterns. So we really attempted to get a holistic view of what was going on from a research basis. We also began to look at best practices in the industry, nationwide as well as globally. And part of our response team, we have an industrial hygienist who is co-authored the After Cleaning Disinfecting Transit Vehicles white paper. So he's been helping guide us as we've been looking at different scenarios. As we come up with different ideas on how to respond, we kind of put it through that lens to ensure that it's going to have the effect that we think it's going to have from kind of the science standpoint behind things. And then we've done some collaborating. So we've been on some international calls with Transport for London, talking with MBTA, LA Metro, and again, we're really trying to learn what everybody else is doing. I can tell you that a lot of it looks like what we're all doing. Most of the comments are very similar. What Bill indicated from King County Metro is similar to what we've been hearing from LA Metro or TriMet or MBTA or PATHs in New Jersey. We're all kind of in the same situation trying to figure this out. So there's really not a silver bullet to all of this as much as there's good strategy to figure out how we deploy things. So for our rider feedback, we heard that about 64% thought that they would be riding as frequently or more frequently than they were before the pandemic. About 25% said that they plan to ride a little less often. And reasons for that, 62% are concerned about getting ill on transit. 60% believe they'll be working from home more often, with 17% no longer making the same trips because something's changed in their life that they don't need that same pattern, and they're unsure of what the new pattern is going to be. And then 12%, they found another way to travel, and that could be telecommuting, that could be a host of different ways to figure out to get where they need to go and accomplish what they need to accomplish. But this is what we've heard from our research so far. So for us, we have kind of bucketed our execution into two different priorities, priority 1 and priority 2. And so what we've been focused on the most is we know from our industrial hygienists that one of the main things we can do is we can reach 100% of passengers, employees with face covering and compliant with that at all times. That's a huge win. So we've been focused on that and the ability to do that. How do we message it? How do we continue to support our passengers and give them what they need? So we've increased our cleaning protocol. So again, as I indicated, we're following the APTA guidelines that our industrial hygienists helped set. And so we've increased cleaning protocols along all routes, stations, and vehicles. And then we're looking at and we're continuing to analyze opportunities to increase airflow and filtration. We know from kind of the science behind it, that's a key factor in keeping people safe, the increased airflow. We know the measurements pretty well on our airflows inside our trains. They're actually better than in a typical office building, say, so the recirculating air is pretty good. We bring in a lot of fresh air, and we've been begun to analyze what that looks like on bus. All of them are a little bit different, a little different controls for the operator, a little different way to increase airflow. And so we've been looking at each and beginning to develop guidelines and guidance for what that would look like. Although my hygienist tells me pretty frequently, if you can open the windows, that's a lot of good airflow. So we're trying to figure all of that out, balance with passenger comfort and everything else. And then priority 2, communicate passengers load by route and time of day. So we want to give people the information that if their typical travel is a little more congested in terms of the amount of people on the train or in a bus, and they have the ability to shift their travel pattern, we want to give them the information so that they can do that. We've also been reaching out to local employers and talking to them to try to understand how their shifts may change and how service may need to change to respond to those shift changes. Increase passenger communication. So we've done very similar to CTAC and KCM have done and others. We've increased what passengers need to know to continue to ride safe. And then we're looking at the feasibility to provide hand sanitizer. So it's difficult to get right now. We want to make sure that we're not putting hand sanitizer out there that is empty by 8 o'clock in the morning and sits empty all day long with people expecting it to dispense, and it does not. So we're trying to figure out how do we do that in a way that if you need it, it's there and you can utilize it. Again, we've calculated out about a gallon jug is about, if everybody takes 2 pumps, it's about 1,000 people that can use it. So when you're looking at moving 12,000 people a day, which is about what our boardings are for Link Light Rail, obviously you're going to run out pretty quick. So we're trying to figure out how to operationalize that. For some of the communication strategies, we're focusing on, customer first focus. And again, this isn't kind of in terms of trying to win back customers or bring ridership back. We're trying to communicate to customers where they're at and let them know we're here for them when they need to utilize our service. We're making sure that it's diverse and multilingual communities are being targeted so that they have the information they need in the way they need to receive the information or the way they want to receive the information. And then increased communication about access to transit in terms of, especially if you're experiencing some economic impacts right now due to COVID. So some of the creative, we began to add face coverings to our trains to, again, lean into the fact that we want you to cover your face as well. So we've covered the front of the train's face. We've been going with a "We've got you covered" messaging. And so these are bus exteriors that, again, lean into the face covering message. And then we're focused on safety and service equality. So face coverings again, and the touchless payment options that we have, and touchless fare checking that we've put into place since COVID hit. We distributed face masks on June 26th at high ridership multimodal stations, and we've been figuring out the best way to operationalize that again, where there's no way for us to be everywhere at all times. And there's concern about the hygiene of, if you say you put a mask in a box, our hygienist is concerned if people start to reach their hands in and pull things out, you contaminate other ones. So we've been trying to use our employees as ambassadors to strategically hit different moments within the system to remind people to wear a mask, as well as provide a mask for them if they need one. And then emphasis on reduced fare options. So again, we want people to know that if you need to ride, but you've experienced some type of hardship right now, we still have options for you to get to where you need to go. And with that, that's kind of where we're at Sound Transit.
Thanks, Russ. Appreciate that. Some good information. One question I had is, all of your bus and train operators, other Sound Transit staff interact with the public, how are they holding up? How are they doing?
I think they're holding up well. I mean, it's difficult when what your mission is and what you fundamentally do day in and day out and attempt to get better and better at it each day to serve people has so radically changed. And you need to now think in a totally different way than the industry has thought for years. So it's a challenge, but I think from what I see, most of our staff are up for the challenge and trying to stay positive about the new realities.
Well, thanks, Russ. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our last presenter, and certainly not least, is Kendle Bjelland. Kendle is Senior Program Manager with Commute Seattle. And Kendle, you kind of touch a lot of these other organizations with what you folks do. So please share with us a little bit more about the good things that Commute Seattle is doing.
Yeah, happy to do so. In the interest of time, I know I took a look at the question box and see there's some great questions in there. I'll go quickly and that will work well because Bill and others have covered a lot of what I was excited to share as well. So waiting for the slide to change. Commute Seattle, we're a nonprofit that is formed as a public-private partnership between the members of the Downtown Transportation Alliance. That's King County Metro, City of Seattle, Department of Transportation, Sound Transit, Downtown Seattle Association, Port of Seattle, and the Washington State DOT. And basically we work with employers, hundreds of businesses in the city, as well as property managers to help employees get to work in a sustainable way. And I think Bill also did a great job of sort of setting the pre-COVID context. Seattle was doing extraordinarily well. We had almost half of our peak hour commuters coming downtown by transit. And we also had just seen a pretty large, remarkable even telework increase from 3% to 6% between 2017 and 2019, which we were very excited about, but I think that's even going to continue going up farther. We also just heard a lot about how transit service is going to be restricted going forward for a lot of reasons, including decreased sales tax, decreased the Seattle Benefit District going away, overall the impacts of COVID. You may have seen Metro has some service cuts planned for September. So we're not going to be able to just go back to the transportation habits we had before COVID. And we won't be able to just switch back on workplaces in downtown Seattle or throughout the city. Instead, there's going to be sort of a slow ramp up, and we're going to have to shift a lot of those former transit riders over to other modes of transportation. Unfortunately, there's not enough room on our streets or in the parking garages downtown for everyone to get back to work by car. Over the last decade, we've conducted a biennial mode split study, and the actual number of cars commuting into Seattle at peak hour during rush hour, Monday through Friday, tends to stay around 70,000 cars, maybe going up to 74 or down a little bit, but there's clearly a capacity of our roads where congestion just gets too bad and forces people to pick other modes. So if they're not driving and they're not able to take the bus, what are these folks going to do? One of the obvious solutions is a lot of people are going to telework more than they did before. The slide on screen right now comes from the May survey we did of over 400 employers, where we talked to them about their workplace experience with COVID and what they thought their plans might be for returning to the workplace in the future. You can see the blue bars. Most people before COVID didn't have a really robust telework culture. If they were doing it at all, it was on a infrequent, maybe once a month basis. Now they're predicting that their staff are going to be working remotely a few days a week. And with the West Seattle Bridge closure, I think that's certainly going to be true. Next slide here. Here we go. So Commute Seattle, why would you want to talk to us? I just wanted to throw out that not only do we work directly with employers and property managers, but we're able to share a lot of those insights with others. So whether you are a property manager, an employer, or just need to get a read on what we're hearing from those customers, you're welcome to reach out to us. If your company's digging in for long-term telework, interested in learning more about flexible scheduling, returning to the work site, what's going on with the commuter benefit ordinance, or what sorts of incentives exist around the Orca business programs as you do explore coming back to the workplace. We're here to help you with that, as well as West Seattle Bridge planning. So you can reach out to us at info@commuteseattle.com or visit our website. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Kendle. Your organization does a lot of good work, and you are an important and integral part of our whole transit system here. So we appreciate the good work that Commute Seattle does. You know, you mentioned the West Seattle Bridge, and of course we don't know the demise or what remains to be determined and all that. So anything else you want to share on that? I mean, it certainly affects both employees and employers. Trying to get to and from West Seattle. Is there anything you can share with respect to that?
Yeah, with that bridge being closed for at least 2 years, we're going to be working with employers on programming that may allow employees who live over there to continue working remotely, even as their other work sites open back up. And we're talking to employers and property managers in West Seattle about what they can do to stay accessible to workers. So the city is working closely with us on that, and we're happy to talk to anyone about more details.
Very good. Well, we're about out of time. I am going to throw out one question for all of you, and that is that I've read that there's been good reporting about bicycle sales are way up, and will this actually translate into more people commuting with bicycles and or with combination of bus or train. Just like to get your thoughts real quick.
I'll jump in first. I think we probably each have our own angle on that, but I think that this whole sort of retrenching of the commute world does offer opportunities, not just for transit to redefine itself, as I think Kendle, Russ, and I all touched on, but also to continue building the market for other modes. That said, I mean, Seattle is a dark, wet, challenging environment for a lot of the year. It's a hilly environment, and so bicycling is not going to work for everybody, not even e-bikes, but there's much untapped potential.
Yeah, and I'll echo what Bill said. And you know, I think that bicycles are always part of the trip chaining. And when there's hills and there's bad weather, you trip chain a little bit more with bus and rail. And when it's nice out, you trip chain a little bit less. So I think there's opportunities for all travel to reinvent themselves here. And I think we're open to what that looks like.
Well, thank you for that. Well, we are out of time, and I just want to close by saying, first of all, thank you to our 4 panelists for their time and efforts so that they could share their knowledge and expertise with us. Bill Bryant, Laurel Dunphy, Russ Arnold, and Kendle, Bjelland. I also want to thank the organizations that provided resources for this webinar, and that's King County Metro, Port of Seattle, Sound Transit, and Commute Seattle. And then thank you to the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat for their support and sponsorship of today's webinar. And just kind of single out Heather Spray was kind of behind the scenes. She's our Global Initiatives Coordinator, and she kept me organized and kept us organized through this webinar. She's like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, working all the controls. And finally, thank you for joining us for the past hour and taking the time to join us. We hope you found it informative and educational, and we hope that you enjoyed it and will join us for a future CTBUH event on some other relevant topic. And lastly, remember, wear a mask. Wear a mask. Have a good day, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.